Let's talk about reframing negative triggers, thoughts, and feelings, because a lot of the times we know, right, Mike, that people can trigger us and we respond, yet we're 100% responsible for our own reactions and behaviors. So this is Mike Mandel from Mike Mandel Hypnosis. Let's talk about this. Mike, what is a trigger?
You just triggered me, Chris. What are triggers? Triggers are anchors in NLP terms. They are any kind of a stimulus, something you see, hear, or feel that is connected to a specific state. And triggers tend to be bad anchors. Somebody can do something and it puts you immediately in a bad state of some kind.
Yeah, in fact, trigger is kind of a painted word because nobody talks about a trigger for a positive thing. We always talk about, oh, I was triggered by that.
Well, the fact that it's part of a gun is probably something to do.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
But when people know your triggers, whatever they are, they can use them to their advantage and your disadvantage if they're nefarious people. If they know they can put you in a bad state, it will be a really, really nasty thing. So one of the first things you can do is identify your triggers, know what sets you off, and learn to ignore them. Don't empower the person, because if you ignore it, eventually it'll stop working. It will lose its power.
So in a sense, you're going to teach yourself, retrain your brain,
recondition it,
to respond differently to what used to be a negative trigger. That way, somebody can't use it against you. Now, keep in mind also, people who love you may still take advantage of your trigger because they're in a pissed off state and they think that they just need to...
They're trying to help you.
Yeah, or even maybe they're just mad at you in the moment, and it could be your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, best friend, whatever, and they're pissed off at you for something, and so they push your button, and they know that it's going to bother you.
And right away, the emotions go through the roof, and now you're no longer in a useful conversation, because when we get really emotional, we become stupider, according to human theory. So one thing that you really need to avoid with triggers is if you explain to the person, if they're nefarious and not a good friend or family member or whatever, and you say to someone who pushes your buttons at work or whatever, you tell them how much it bothers you. Guess what it does? It empowers them because they know they have something to get you with when they want to make you look angry in front of other people or whatever it is.
Here's the key to making me look like an idiot.
Yeah, it's pretty well handing it to them like that. Now, it could be an insulting word. It could be a slur of some kind. It might be just calling you a wimp or a moron or whatever it is that
could even be just a gesture, right?
It can be a gesture. It can be someone rolling their eyes if they know it bothers you or smirking when you say something like, oh, here he goes again. A trigger can also be passive-aggressive, like not answering you when you ask them something, or leaving the room when you're talking to them. That will really trigger a lot of people. But the more powerful state you are in, the fewer things will trigger you. So method number one, when you realize this is happening, instantly dissociate and see things from the outside and use the state of curiosity instead of anger. This is not difficult to do. So suppose Chris does something that he knows triggers.
Well, let's say you know that I really hate when people interrupt me. Oh, there you go. Or in this case, so if I'm talking, if I'm starting some sort of important statement.
Look at that bird on Mrs. Colesart's roof. Yeah.
So that would, in a lot of times, I'll get really pissed off.
Right. So what he's got to do is notice as soon as he starts feeling that this is happening,
step out
in his mind, step out and see the two of you in the situation and look at it with curiosity, like, oh, I wonder what that person's doing. I wonder why this is happening, instead of going to anger. And it will really, really quickly remove the emotional charge.
And do you know what I've learned about myself when that happens? Chris? I was making my comment at the wrong time. I didn't have any attention in that moment. There was something else going on, and I was actually the one interrupting. That can happen. I mean, it's not always the case, but that might be something I would realize when I step out and observe.
Okay, that's good. So method number two, we know to step out and observe with curiosity. Method number two is an interesting thing you can add to it. Simply, when you notice you're triggered by someone and that they're doing it on purpose, relax and breathe slowly and deeply without saying anything, without reacting to them, and that will quickly let the feelings dissipate. Just feel them go.
So you can almost imagine that you have a timer where you're relaxing and breathing, and there's this internal timer, and you don't permit yourself to react during that countdown. Maybe it's 30 seconds or something like that.
Sure.
And more often than not, the feelings will just have vanished, and you'll actually retrain your brain to respond that way instead of the old negative way.
I like it. Now, there's also not just triggers, but negative feelings, negative emotions that can be reframed. I'll give you an example from my own life. When I was doing a lot of hypnosis shows for 43 years, sometimes I would have to do a corporate event where it was a rowdy crowd or there weren't enough people to do a good show, and I'd start getting an anxious feeling, butterflies in my stomach before going on stage.
What if this is a crappy show?
What if this is a crappy show? I can feel it in my stomach. stomach, I changed the meaning of the butterflies in the stomach. I started saying, oh, this is adrenaline. This is my power rush. This means I'm going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
Calling it a power rush instead of nervousness made it much more liable to work for me than against me.
Very simple to just change the label. I love it. Okay, what else have you got? What other negative, whatever negative things can you reframe?
You can reframe things like, oh, there she goes. She's nagging me again. And instead, you change it to, oh, I have a chance to practice patience here. Or you take something like, oh, I've made idiotic financial mistakes. Reframe that as, I've learned some stuff that doesn't work. Turn it into you've got an education. Reframing changes what an event, situation, or communication means. It takes emotional stuff, emotional impact, and it alters your perception of it. Scott Adams said a lot about this.
Yeah, he had a book called Reframe Your Brain. We did a podcast with him. We'll put a link in the description under this video. It's a great book. What does he say about reframes?
Well, it's fabulous because as an NLP trainer, I've used reframes for years, but he looks at this from different angles. He said a reframe doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to make sense. You don't even have to believe it to make it work for you. And if you just use it consistently and let it work, it will work for you.
All right, let's cover, you're totally right. I mean, all you have to do is freaking pretend it works and you'll find that it does. Okay, so let's go through a few examples.
Reframes, yeah.
All right, here we go. My friend calls me too often and is annoying.
My friend calls often because he cares about me and wants to make sure I'm doing well.
All right, how about, I'm a useless handyman. I can't do anything.
My skills are in another equally valid area.
All right. My inconsiderate, yeah, that's right. My inconsiderate neighbors are having a loud party. I mean, that could be a trigger for sure, right?
Reframe. My neighbors have a large, happy family.
All right, here's another one.
All right.
My dog is bugging me for attention while I'm trying to work. I don't ever deal with that one, by the way.
My dog loves to spend time with me.
Yeah, that's a great one. Oh, because that would be a trigger for a lot of people when they're getting interrupted from work, not necessarily by a pet.
Right.
How about, I've made a ton of mistakes over the years?
Oh, well, that's easy.
Think about that one, right? You could make a mistake and trigger yourself into a temper tantrum or get pissed off. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to have temper tantrums all the time.
Oh, I know.
For mistakes, yeah.
Well, the person says, I made a ton of mistakes over the years. The reframe is, I've learned a lot of things that don't work.
Yeah, that's a great one.
That's an education again.
The key here is to retrain your brain to think that way. So when we habitually reframe these unresourceful things to become resourceful statements in our lives, then our lives get better.
Right. And when we eliminate the anchors that trigger us, people are unable to push our buttons, and that is immensely empowering. The end result is a better life.
Speaking of a better life, you want to join our Facebook group called Brain Software. We'll put a link in the description under this video. Join the group because it's free and it'll help you live a better life because we're in there.
Brilliant.
And we'll help you live a better life.
Very good. Very
So that's really all I wanted to say other than subscribe to our YouTube channel. Ring that bell so you'll always be notified of our latest videos, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks
again.
once again, and
good night.